Robin Flynn filling in for Elias Makos with you until 12 p.m. and with you all week long. Elias will be back next week on Monday. From the Ukraine to the Middle East to right here in Montreal with encampments at McGill, tensions have been heightened in 2024. What were some of the biggest international conflicts and how did politics abroad shape the political sphere right here in North America? Joining us to discuss is Roger Hilton. He's a defense fellow at Globsec based in Vienna and Bratislava. Thank you so much for being here, Roger. Appreciate it.
Hi, Montreal.
What were some of your biggest takeaways from 2024?
I've been doing this for a while, and I really just want to reiterate what an unbelievably crazy year it was. From the neck-breaking threat landscape that included high tempo of gray zone threats, sabotage, covert killings, compromised critical infrastructure, cyber attacks, foreign manipulation. The list is really endless. Intense transnational organized crime, mercenary activity, and climate change. So when taken together over a 365-day period, the threat sort of landscape and metrics was really just unprecedented in its implications for policymakers and for citizens. For me, the health of democracy, I think, is in an underwhelming state. For all of our listeners, it was the super year for elections with 3.7 billion voters, where the main takeaways for me living in Europe was, the verdict on democracy wasn't great, with far-right parties making big gains and, as we know, incumbents getting the boot. So I think populism is still very much lurking. And for me, two big surprises, just to reiterate, was after 5 months, Ukraine is still holding Russian territory. And something we might get into later is the Romanian Supreme Court canceling the presidential elections due to Russian foreign interference. So we could go on forever, but those are my greatest hits.
Yeah, I would say Ukraine is one that I feel like fell to the back burner because of the situation in the Middle East, which seemed to intensify every day. So what's going on right now in the war between Russia and Ukraine?
I mean, time flies. It's over 1,000 days, and Ukraine is still standing and, fighting under very tight constraints. Unfortunately, over this year, Kiev has lost 2,800 square kilometers of territory. Russia is making gains, but it's important to sort of reiterate that their window of opportunity is closing. They're going to struggle mightily with manpower and recruitment. We're now convicts, and illegal immigrants are getting tied up in this. You're going to have serious material issues in terms of hardware, and it's an exceedingly fragile economy. And just to sort of put that in perspective for everybody, there's theft of butters going on across Russia. And I think sort of as the winter fighting commences for Ukraine, unfortunately, they're going to be dealing with massive energy shortages as well as manpower themselves. And, what will be really lurking is the prospect of Trump 2.0, what that means for future peace talks. So I think Russia is going to push as hard as they can right now. And Ukraine just got the last tranche of the aid package from the Biden administration today. So it's unbelievably important that in this moment they hold the line until Trump comes in. And again, here in Europe, see if European allies can in some way help fill the void should, the Trump administration pull back on some of the aid.
Now, Trump was very critical of the Democrats for not doing more about the Russia-Ukraine situation. I believe he said something along the lines of, on my first day in office, I'll make a call and it'll be over. Is that something that you actually see U.S. involvement in the war increasing when Trump takes office?
I mean, it's just a farcical position and hyperbole on Trump's part to come on and say that he can end the war in one day. I mean, exactly as I mentioned now, there's really no reason, at least in the foreseeable future, that Putin would want to sort of step down from any of his maximalist positions about, disallowing Ukraine to join NATO. So I think they're really in for, Trump is going to have a very stark reality about how this works. There's been some peace plans floated by his special envoy, Keith Kellogg, about what to do with it. But the most important thing here is that, both Moscow and Kiev, somebody is going to try to be the loser in terms of who's not willing to negotiate with Trump. And I think that's a very astute move by Ukraine that while it's a very tough pill to swallow that they might have to temporarily accept some territorial concessions, they're at least saying, we're in good faith, we're coming to the table, and it will make Russia look like the bad guy, which could help them, in future aid or whatever the next steps are when Trump comes in terms of support.
In conversation with Roger Hilton, a defense fellow at Globsec, of course, the dominating headlines this year were the conflict between Israel and Hamas, the war in Palestine, looping in as well Syria and Lebanon. It's getting pretty nasty in the Middle East right now. What is going on? What surrounding countries have played a part in this conflict?
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely we are entering a new Middle East. Israel's actions over the last year has really reset the table and the regional dynamic. While it had its embarrassments after the attacks by Hamas, it has really come back with a vengeance and vanquished Iran's access of resistance, which we can talk about Syria, Hezbollah, and Hamas. And while Israel has really consolidated its position now, the byproduct of this, with Tehran being so bloodied with everything, is that there's obviously the threat that it's going to accelerate its weapons programs as the last source of deterrence, which will be another major, foreign policy issue for the Trump administration. And alternatively, if they don't want to go down the nuclear route, there's a lot of other ways Tehran can hurt Israel or the United States, whether it's by waging cyber attacks or choking energy supplies in the Strait of Hormuz, where there's a huge transport going. So, yeah, I mean, it's brand new. I expect to see the restarting of the normalization process of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, maybe not in the first year, but I think that's something that Trump will want to hold up as a trophy that he was able to do that. The question of Palestinian statehood, I think, still remains very unclear. It was a precondition for Saudi Arabia, but given the current government in Israel, I'm not sure where that will go. On Syria, the honeymoon period is definitely over in terms of the Assad regime being overthrown. The hard work starts now, and some of the bumps that everybody expected about some regional disturbance, Alawite loyalists to Assad have picked up a little bit. At least, from reports, the U.S. is in direct contact with the rebels. There should be really a bonanza of foreign players vying for influence in the future of the country. But as the leader of the rebels said, he expects between 3 or 4 years before a governance, constitution, and voting is installed. But the wild card for me is still the Houthis in Yemen. They seem to be, they've come out unscathed a little bit. Israel has attacked them recently. But yeah, brand new Middle East we'll all wake up to in 2025.
The relationship between Canada and the U.S. is obviously one that is of interest to folks in Montreal. That relationship is increasingly strained. Plus, there's some instability on the Canadian government's part. Calls for Justin Trudeau to step down. Not sure who the new leader could be. Canada is entering an election in 2025. Donald Trump is taking office in January. What do you expect from the Canada-U.S. relationship this year?
No, I mean, it's definitely a bit messy, and I don't know, outgoing, Minister Freeland said, the Canada-U.S. relationship is like Baskin and Robbins. There's so many different tastes to get through it. My guiding principle or my counsel to Ottawa would be a policy of being firm but flexible. Ottawa will be in a bit of a better position, even as you mentioned, with all of the domestic issues, as it takes over the G7 presidency in the new year. So I think it's very important for Canada to sort of harness its alliance and project a united front. Nobody wants a trade war, and I think if they can come to a common understanding and agreement on defense spending and border security, a lot of the big asks by Trump could be avoided. But as I said, I mean, you need to put money behind those resources. And one thing, at least, that Canadians should pick up on is, despite sort of the threats coming from Trump, the whole issue now about skilled migrants and what that means, I mean, that's going to be a great recruitment opportunity for Canada, as it was during his first term. So definitely a bit of a messy start with how it goes. But as I said, I mean, firm and flexible and working with alliances to get the best out of it when it comes to dealing with Trump.
Wrapping up with Roger Hilton, defense fellow at Globsec. We have about 60 seconds left, Roger. What are your New Year's resolutions for the Canadian government?
Yeah, I really miss home, and it gives me a very unique perspective looking at Canada from abroad, as both from the Asia-Pacific side or from the European side. But I unfortunately get the sense that Canada still remains exposed and very vulnerable for a variety of reasons, notably the lack of defense spending. But for the government, my New Year's resolution is raising on public diplomacy, to have Canada out there more loudly on the world stage, investing in defense capabilities for the Arctic, for the Atlantic, for the Pacific, which is something that is solely lacked both for itself and to project credibility with its allies. And most importantly is educating the general public on the threat landscape the country is facing. Regina, Victoria, St. John's. I understand that the cost of living and, the average person is dealing with a lot on their plate right now, but it's so important that they really understand that the world is on fire and that investing in resources and understanding the threats that Canadians are facing is so incredible. And it's on the government, communities, and educators to also to promote that message collectively so that we can all be Canada strong in what will be a very, very bumpy 2025.
Roger Hilton is a defense fellow at Globsec. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insights today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, and party responsibly, everybody.